The cafe on Delancey and Orchard opened at 6 sharp every morning, but the city was already awake by then. Delivery trucks hissed at the curb. A bus groaned as it knelt for passengers. Somewhere down the block, someone argued into a phone like the world was listening. Inside the cafe, though, there was a pocket of calm that felt borrowed, temporary, like quiet you weren't supposed to get used to. Daniel Crawford liked it that way. He arrived at 6:12, almost every day. Not early enough to look eager. Not late enough to miss the calm. He pushed the door open with 2 fingers, letting it swing back on its own, and took in the room with a quick glance that pretended not to be a scan. Exposed brick. Mismatched chairs. A chalkboard menu written by someone whose handwriting slanted when they got tired. He chose the table by the window, the one with a faint wobble if you leaned too hard on the left leg. He sat with his back to the wall, coat still on, hands folded around nothing. When the waitress came, he ordered black coffee. No sugar. No lid. He paid in cash. He didn't linger over the menu because he already knew he wouldn't eat. To anyone watching, he was forgettable. That was the point. Daniel had spent most of his adult life being recognized. Airports. Boardrooms. Charity galas where people pretended not to stare and stared anyway. He'd learned the weight of a name, how it bent conversations before they even began. Here no one knew it. Here he was just another man passing time before somewhere else demanded him. The cafe had regulars. A construction worker with a limp who always asked for extra cream. A woman with silver braids who read the same paperback every morning and never turned the page. A young couple who argued quietly about money, like whispering made the numbers smaller. And then there was the waitress. Her name tag said Lena Morris. Daniel noticed her before he noticed anything else. It wasn't beauty in the obvious way. It was how she moved through the narrow space between tables like she was measuring every step. How she kept her elbows tucked in, her shoulders slightly tight, as if bracing for someone to bump her even when the room was empty. She smiled when she had to. Not wide. Not fake. Just enough to be polite. She remembered orders. Not in a showy way. In a survival way. When a man complained about his coffee being too hot, she didn't argue. She didn't apologize either. She replaced it without a word, jaw set, eyes already moving on to the next task. When a chair scraped too loudly behind her, she flinched, caught herself, then kept going like nothing happened. Daniel watched without staring. Years of practice had taught him how. On his first morning there, he barely registered her beyond the efficiency. On the second, he noticed the thin scar on her forearm when she reached to clear a plate. Faded. The kind that didn't ask for attention but didn't quite hide either. On the third morning, something else stood out. A man at the counter raised his voice over a missing muffin. It wasn't loud. Just sharp enough to cut the air. Lena froze for half a second, shoulders lifting, breath catching. Then she smoothed her apron and handled it like a professional. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Daniel did. It tugged at something he hadn't touched in a long time. A memory of rooms with buzzing fluorescent lights. Of people who learned to read danger in tone rather than volume. He told himself not to assign meaning. Not yet. He took a sip of coffee. Bitter. Burnt. Exactly how he liked it. The next morning, the city smelled like rain even though the sky was clear. Lena set his coffee down without looking at him, and that's when he saw it. The bruise sat just below her sleeve, dark and uneven. Not fresh, but not old enough to be forgotten. Fingers, maybe. Or something worse. It hadn't been there the day before. Lena noticed his eyes. She adjusted her sleeve in one smooth motion, practiced like she'd done it before. Her hand trembled once, then stilled. "Morning," she said. "Morning," Daniel replied, his voice steady even as his chest tightened. She moved away quickly. Daniel didn't follow her with his eyes. He stared into the coffee instead, watching steam curl and disappear. He told himself there were explanations. Accidents. Bad luck. He told himself it wasn't his business. But the bruise stayed with him, long after the cup was empty and the city swallowed him back up. As he stood to leave, he paused by the door. The bell above it chimed softly like it always did. He looked back once, just once, at the woman behind the counter, moving like someone who couldn't afford to slow down. If you've ever noticed a small detail that wouldn't let you go, you know the feeling. The kind that makes you come back the next day even when you tell yourself you won't. And if stories like that pull you in, you might want to stay close. Subscribe, stay with us, and see where this one leads. Because the next morning, the bruise would still be there. And Daniel would realize noticing it was only the beginning. Lena Morris learned early that stillness could be dangerous. It was why she moved the way she did, always in motion, always useful. Standing still invited questions. Questions invited attention. Attention, more often than not, invited trouble. So she stayed busy. If her hands were full, no one looked too closely at her face. If she was wiping a table or refilling a cup, no one asked how she was doing. She started her mornings before the sun came up, in a basement apartment where the air never quite felt fresh. The walls held onto moisture like a bad memory. Even in winter, there was a faint smell of damp clothes and old detergent. Lena woke before her alarm most days, her body trained by years of necessity. Amaya slept on the bed closest to the heater, curled inward, her breathing soft and uneven. 7 years old. All elbows and knees. Lena watched her for a moment every morning, counting breaths without realizing she was doing it. She brushed her daughter's hair gently, careful not to tug, careful not to wake her too fast. "Up, Bug," she whispered. "We gotta move." Amaya groaned and pulled the blanket over her head. Lena smiled despite herself. That sound, complaint mixed with comfort, was one of the few things that still made her smile without effort. Breakfast was toast if there was bread. Cereal if there wasn't. Some mornings, Lena skipped eating altogether, telling herself coffee would hold her over. She packed Amaya's backpack, double-checked homework, signed permission slips she barely remembered reading. By the time they stepped outside, the city was already impatient. Car horns. Buses sighing. Someone shouting 3 languages at once into a phone. Lena held Amaya's hand tightly, not because the sidewalk was crowded, but because letting go felt wrong. She dropped Amaya off with a neighbor who watched kids for cash in silence. They didn't talk much. That was an unspoken agreement Lena appreciated. The subway ride to the cafe was short but exhausting. Too many people. Too many smells. Too many bodies pressed too close. Lena stood near the door, one hand on the pole, eyes down, jaw tight. She counted stops like breaths. At the cafe, she tied her apron, pinned her name tag, and became someone else. Work Lena didn't flinch as much. Work Lena smiled on command. Work Lena didn't let thoughts linger. She memorized orders. She anticipated needs. She moved like the room depended on her because sometimes it did. She noticed Daniel Crawford the first day he walked in, even if she pretended not to. Customers like him were easy in one way. He didn't ask questions. Didn't linger. Didn't make jokes that expected laughter. He ordered simply and tipped fairly without making a show of it. People like that usually wanted to be left alone. She understood that instinct. What unsettled her was how he watched. Not in a way that crawled across her skin. Not in the way some men did. His gaze didn't pin her. It assessed the room, passed over faces, then moved on. Still, when his eyes landed on her, it felt like being seen instead of looked at. She didn't like that. The bruise ached more than she let on. It throbbed when she lifted trays. Burned when hot plates brushed too close. She kept her sleeve pulled down, even when sweat gathered at the base of her neck and trickled down her spine. She told herself it would fade. They always did. When Daniel's eyes dropped to her arm that morning, she felt it immediately. A tightening in her chest. A heat behind her eyes. She adjusted her sleeve without thinking, heart racing as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. He didn't say anything. That almost made it worse. Throughout the morning, she caught him glancing up at her, then away. Not staring. Checking. like he was confirming something for himself. By noon, her nerves were shot. A cup slipped from her hand near the dishwasher. It shattered, the sound sharp and final. Lena froze, breath locked in her chest. For a split second, she expected shouting. Blame. Something loud. Nothing came. Her manager sighed, annoyed but distracted, and told her to be careful. Someone joked about it being Monday. The world moved on. Lena laughed when she was supposed to. Her hands shook as she cleaned up the mess. She didn't notice Daniel watching then. She was too busy willing her body to calm down. When her shift ended, she peeled off the apron like shedding a skin. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked older than she felt. Or maybe she just felt older than she was supposed to. She rolled her sleeve up slightly and studied the bruise. Darker now. Angrier. Get it together, she murmured to herself. On her way out, she passed Daniel near the door. For a moment, she thought he might say something. Her stomach twisted in anticipation. He didn't? That should have been a relief. Instead, it followed her all the way home. The feeling that someone had noticed, and that noticing might cost her more than she was ready to pay. That night, as Lena lay awake listening to the building settle and creak around her, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message lit the screen. She didn't open it right away, because she already knew who it was from. And whatever it said, she knew sleep wouldn't come after. Daniel had trained himself not to assume. It was a habit forged the hard way back when assumptions could cost someone their freedom. Back when a detail taken the wrong way could harden into a narrative that no one bothered to question. Even now, years removed from courtrooms and case files, that discipline stayed with him. Observe. Note. Do not conclude too quickly. So when he noticed the scar on Lena Morris's forearm, he told himself it meant nothing. It was thin, pale, and old, the kind of mark that blended into skin if you weren't looking for it. He caught it as she reached across his table to clear an empty plate, her sleeve riding up just enough to expose it. She didn't flinch then. Didn't rush to hide it. That, more than the scar itself, was what made him dismiss it. Everyone carried marks. Life left them whether you asked or not. Still, the image followed him longer than he expected. That afternoon, Daniel found himself distracted during a meeting that should have commanded his full attention. A glass-walled conference room. A skyline view most people paid extra to admire. Voices droned about timelines and projections while his mind replayed a flash of pale skin and an old wound. He shook it off. By the time he returned to the cafe the next morning, he'd decided he was imagining patterns that weren't there. Lena moved through the room the same way she always did. Efficient. Quiet. Careful not to take up more space than necessary. She didn't smile at him when she brought his coffee, but she wasn't rude either. Just neutral. Daniel watched her hands. He told himself he was being ridiculous. That he was projecting ghosts onto strangers. That he was here for the quiet, not the people. Then the man at the counter raised his voice. It wasn't shouting. Not exactly. Just a sharp edge to his words, frustration leaking out over a missing pastry. The kind of moment that usually passed without consequence. Lena froze. It was brief. A fraction of a second. But it was unmistakable. Her shoulders tightened, her chin lifted slightly, and her breath caught like she was bracing for something that didn't arrive. Daniel felt it in his chest before he understood why. The man's voice dropped. The issue resolved. Someone behind Daniel laughed at a joke he didn't hear. Life resumed its pace. Lena smoothed her apron and carried on. Daniel took a slow sip of coffee. The taste felt harsher than usual. That flinch lodged itself next to the scar in his mind. Not proof. Not evidence. Just data. The kind you didn't ignore if you were paying attention. He paid attention. Over the next few days he noticed more things. Not dramatic ones. Small human ones. The way Lena always positioned herself with an escape route when the cafe got crowded. How she avoided the storage room unless someone else was nearby. How sudden movements, even harmless ones, made her blink too fast. He never stared. He never asked. He never let his gaze linger long enough to be obvious. And then one morning he saw the bruise. It sat just below the sleeve line, dark and uneven, blooming against her skin like something that didn't belong there. It hadn't been there the day before. Daniel was certain of that. He had replayed the previous morning in his head, searching his memory the way he used to search transcripts. No bruise. Now there was one. Lena noticed him looking. He saw it in the way her body shifted, the practiced ease with which she tugged her sleeve down. The movement was automatic, instinctive. Her hand trembled as she set his coffee down. "Morning," she said like nothing was wrong. "Morning," he replied. Their eyes met for a heartbeat too long. Something unspoken passed between them. Not understanding. Recognition. She turned away quickly. Daniel sat there longer than usual, the coffee cooling untouched. He told himself not to intervene. Not to invent a story where there might be none. But his mind betrayed him, filling in gaps with memories he'd buried. A woman in a gray sweater who insisted she'd walked into a door. Another who swore she'd fallen down the stairs. The same shapes. The same explanations. Different lives. He finished his coffee and stood. He nearly left without saying anything. Nearly convinced himself that silence was respect. Instead he paused by the counter. "Excuse me," he said quietly, keeping his voice low. "I don't mean to overstep." Lena looked up, eyes guarded, walls already rising. "Yes. If you ever need help with something," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Anything at all? I know people." Her expression changed instantly. Not fear. Anger. Sharp and defensive. "I'm fine," she said a little too quickly. "I didn't ask." He nodded, accepting the boundary. "I know," he said. "I just wanted you to know the option exists." She handed him his receipt without meeting his eyes. When Daniel stepped back out onto the sidewalk, the city noise felt louder than usual. He walked 2 blocks before realizing his hands were clenched. Inside the cafe, Lena leaned against the counter and forced her breathing to slow. She hated that her pulse was racing. Hated that a stranger's concern could unravel her so easily. That night, she stared at her phone as it buzzed on the table beside her bed. The message preview was short. "Stay where you are." Her stomach dropped. Because this time she knew exactly what the bruise was for. And she knew tomorrow wouldn't look anything like today. The raised voice shouldn't have mattered. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't even directed at her. But it cut through the cafe like a crack in glass, sharp enough to change the shape of everything around it. "Hey," the man said, irritation riding the edge of his tone. "I ordered oat milk." Lena was already halfway to the sink when she heard it. Her body reacted before her mind did. Her shoulders lifted. Her spine went rigid. For a fraction of a second she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. She turned slowly, keeping her movements measured, careful not to rush. Rushing made things worse. It always had. "I can remake it," she said evenly. Her voice sounded calm, which was something she'd learned how to do even when her pulse spiked hard enough to make her ears ring. The man waved a hand like he was brushing away a fly. "Just do it right this time." Daniel watched from his table, the coffee cup halfway to his mouth. It wasn't what the man said. It was how Lena reacted to it. The way her jaw tightened, the way she nodded once without meeting his eyes, the way her breath stayed shallow even after the exchange ended. It reminded him too much of rooms he used to sit in, where people minimized their own fear because acknowledging it felt more dangerous. Lena remade the drink quickly. She didn't spill. She didn't shake. She didn't drop anything. To anyone else it was a non-event. But Daniel noticed what happened after. She didn't relax. Even as the cafe settled back into its low morning hum, Lena's posture stayed locked, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She glanced toward the door more than once. When a chair scraped behind her, she startled again, barely masking it this time. Daniel set his cup down slowly. He told himself he was reading too much into it. that everyone had bad mornings, that stress lived in bodies in unpredictable ways. He'd learned not to project his past onto strangers. Still, his chest felt tight. Lena finished her shift with a headache pounding behind her eyes. The raised voice replayed in her head, not because of the man himself, but because of what it reminded her of. Tone mattered more than words. It always had. In the back room, she leaned against the metal shelving and pressed her fingers into her temples. The bruise throbbed faintly beneath her sleeve, a dull reminder she couldn't fully ignore. "You good?" a coworker asked casually, passing by. "Yeah," Lena said automatically. "Just tired." That answer covered a lot of things. When she stepped back out front, Daniel was still there. He'd been sitting longer than usual, hands wrapped around his cup like it was anchoring him. Their eyes met again briefly. Lena looked away first. She hated that he saw her. Not because he was wrong, but because being seen meant being known. And being known meant questions. Questions meant consequences. She told herself she was being dramatic. That he was just a man with too much time and nothing better to do than people watch. Still, when her shift ended and she untied her apron, her nerves felt raw, like she'd been scraping them against something all morning. Outside, the city hit her all at once. Car horns. Voices. The subway grate exhaling warm air that smelled faintly of oil and metal. She pulled her jacket tighter, even though the day was warming. On the train home, she stood near the door, gripping the pole, eyes down. A group of teenagers laughed too loudly behind her. Someone's backpack brushed her hip. Her muscles stayed tight the entire ride. At home, Amaya ran to her, arms flung wide. "Mama?" That was the moment Lena finally exhaled. She hugged her daughter tightly, breathing in the clean, familiar smell of soap and crayons. For a few minutes, the world shrank to something manageable. Dinner. Homework. A cartoon playing softly in the background. Normal. But normal didn't last. That night, Lena lay awake long after Amaya fell asleep. The ceiling above her showed a thin crack she'd never bothered to report to the landlord. She stared at it, counting the uneven lines, listening to the building settle. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She didn't jump this time. She'd been expecting it. The screen lit up with a single message. "You embarrassed me today." Her throat tightened. She typed a response, erased it, typed again. Nothing she wrote felt right. Everything sounded like an excuse. Another message came through. "We'll talk later." Lena set the phone face down, her hand shaking despite her effort to keep it still. She turned onto her side, curling inward, listening for sounds in the hallway outside her apartment. Down the block, in his own quiet apartment, Daniel stood at his window, looking out over the city without really seeing it. The image of Lena's flinch replayed in his mind, looping. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to keep him from sleeping. Because the next morning, he knew he'd be looking for something else. And he wasn't sure he wanted to find it. The bruise announced itself before Daniel consciously registered it. Lena was reaching across the table to collect a plate, her sleeve sliding back just enough for the cafe's overhead light to catch the discoloration beneath. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't fresh red either. It had settled into that deep, ugly mix of purple and yellow, like something that had been pressed too hard and left there. Daniel's chest tightened. He knew instantly that it hadn't been there yesterday. Not because he'd been looking for it. Because once your mind learned to catalog injuries, it didn't forget the absence of one. His memory replayed the previous morning with unwanted clarity. Her arm bare to the elbow. The old scar, pale and thin. No swelling. No shadow. This was new. Lena felt his gaze like heat on her skin. She didn't look at him right away. Her body reacted first. The plate clinked slightly as she set it down. Her fingers curled inward, protective. In one smooth motion, she tugged her sleeve back into place. Too smooth. Daniel hated that detail the most. "Morning," she said, voice steady enough to pass. "Morning," he replied, carefully neutral. Their eyes met just for a moment. In that brief space, something flickered across her face. Not fear exactly. Calculation. The kind that came from deciding how much to reveal and to whom. She turned away before he could speak. Daniel sat very still. Around him, the cafe carried on like nothing had changed. A spoon clinked against ceramic. The espresso machine hissed. Someone laughed at a joke he didn't hear. It felt wrong, the normalcy pressing in on something that felt anything but. He lifted the coffee cup and took a sip he didn't taste. Lena's shift felt heavier after that. Every movement made her aware of her arm, of the dull ache that flared when she lifted trays or twisted too fast. Sweat gathered at the base of her neck. Trapped by the long sleeves she refused to roll up despite the rising heat. A coworker joked about the air conditioning being broken again. Figures, Lena said, forcing a laugh. She hated how natural the lie sounded. She caught Daniel's reflection in the glass of the pastry case once, then again in the metal surface of the coffee machine. Not staring. Watching. Like he was checking whether something was still there. It made her skin prickle. By late morning, her nerves were frayed thin. When a cup slipped from her hand and shattered near the dishwasher, the sound echoed too loudly in her head. She froze, heart slamming against her ribs. Nothing happened. No shouting. No anger. Just her manager's tired sigh and someone muttering about bad luck. Lena crouched to clean the mess, hands shaking despite her effort to steady them. She focused on each shard, each small movement, grounding herself in the task. When she stood, she felt lightheaded. Daniel watched all of it. He didn't move. Didn't intervene. Every instinct he had urged caution. He had no proof. No invitation. Just a bruise and a pattern his mind insisted on completing. When Lena brought him the check, he noticed her fingers trembling again. "You okay?" he asked softly before he could stop himself. The question hung between them, heavier than it sounded. Lena stiffened. "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just tired." He nodded, accepting the answer he didn't believe. He stood to leave, then hesitated near the counter. His heart beat harder than it should have. "I don't mean to cross a line," he said quietly. "But if you ever need help with anything, I know people." The words felt inadequate the moment they left his mouth. Lena's eyes snapped up, sharp and bright. "I didn't ask," she said, her voice low but firm. "Please don't." Daniel raised his hands slightly, a gesture of retreat. "Of course," he said. "I'm sorry." She handed him the receipt without another word. As he stepped back onto the sidewalk, the bell over the door chimed softly behind him. The sound followed him down the block, echoing in his chest. He felt foolish, intrusive. And yet, the image of that bruise refused to let go. Inside the cafe, Lena leaned against the counter, breathing through the tightness in her chest. She hated herself for reacting. Hated that concern felt like a threat. But she'd learned the hard way that attention could turn dangerous fast. That night, she barely touched her dinner. Amaya chattered about school, about a drawing she'd made, about a kid who wouldn't share crayons. Lena nodded in the right places, smiling when expected, but her mind was elsewhere. When she tucked her daughter into bed, Amaya reached out and brushed her sleeve. "Mama, what happened to your arm?" Lena pulled back gently. "Nothing," she said. "Just bumped into something." Amaya frowned, unconvinced, but let it go. After the apartment fell quiet, Lena sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. The screen was dark. Too dark. Minutes stretched. Then it buzzed. One message. "Don't be there tomorrow." Her stomach dropped. Because she knew exactly where there was. And for the first time, she wondered if going back to the cafe might cost her more than staying away. Lena didn't sleep that night. She lay on her side, facing the wall, listening to the low hum of the building and the distant sound of traffic filtering through the narrow basement windows. Every few minutes, she checked her phone, half expecting another message, half dreading it. The screen stayed dark, but the silence felt loud, like something holding its breath. When morning came, it didn't feel earned. She moved through her routine on autopilot. Shower. dress. Pack Amaya's bag. The bruise throbbed under her sleeve, a steady reminder that last night's message hadn't been a bluff. She considered calling in sick. The thought surfaced, hovered, then sank under the weight of rent, groceries, and the thin margin she lived inside every month. Avoiding the cafe wouldn't fix anything. It would just raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. So she went. The city felt different that morning. Not louder, sharper. Sounds seemed closer, edges less forgiving. Lena kept her head down on the subway, gripping the pole a little tighter than usual. Every man who stepped into her line of sight registered as a possible threat until proven otherwise. She hated that part of herself, but she'd learned not to argue with it. At the cafe, she arrived early and asked to prep in the back for a bit. The storage room smelled like cardboard and old coffee grounds. She stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, grounding herself in the small, familiar space. "You good?" her manager asked again, passing by. "Yeah," she said. "Just didn't sleep much." He nodded, already moving on. No follow-up. No concern. That too was familiar. The morning rush came and went. Lena kept her sleeve firmly in place, her movements efficient and contained. She avoided the windows. Avoided the door. Every time it opened, her muscles tensed. Daniel didn't come in. She noticed his absence immediately, then felt foolish for it. He was just another customer. People miss days all the time. Still, a strange mix of relief and disappointment settled in her chest. The bruise burned as she reached for a tray, and she winced before she could stop herself. "Careful," a coworker muttered, not unkindly. "Yeah," Lena said, forcing a smile. By noon, her nerves were shredded. She kept replaying the message in her head. "Don't be there tomorrow." He hadn't said why. He never did. He preferred statements to explanations. It was a form of control that worked because it left her guessing. After her shift, Lena didn't go straight home. She walked instead, letting the city carry her for a few blocks. The air was cold, sharp enough to sting her lungs. She welcomed the discomfort. It reminded her she was still here. At home, Amaya was sprawled on the floor with crayons, tongue sticking out in concentration. "Look," she said, holding up a drawing. "That's you and me. 2 stick figures. One taller. One smaller. Holding hands." Lena's throat tightened. "It's perfect," she said, meaning more than the picture. Later, after Amaya fell asleep, Lena finally let herself look at the bruise properly. She rolled her sleeve up and studied it in the bathroom mirror under the harsh light. It looked worse than it felt. Or maybe she was just numb to the pain now. Her phone buzzed. This time she didn't wait. "You home?" the message read. Her fingers hovered over the screen. "Yes," she typed, then erased it. With Amaya she typed instead. The reply came slower than usual. "We'll talk later." Lena set the phone down and closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking again. She pressed them against the cool porcelain of the sink until the tremor eased. She thought about leaving. The idea surfaced often, like a distant shore she could see but never reach. Leaving required money, planning, safety. It required believing that the unknown was less dangerous than what she already knew. That belief felt like a gamble she couldn't afford. The next morning, Daniel returned to the cafe. Lena spotted him the moment he walked in. Same navy coat. Same quiet presence. He scanned the room, then his eyes found her. Something in his expression shifted. Not relief. Concern. She felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the bruise. When she brought his coffee, she kept her sleeve firmly down, her posture rigid. "Morning," he said gently. "Morning," she replied. He studied her face for a moment, then looked away, respecting the boundary she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. As he paid, he spoke quietly, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "You don't look okay," he said. She stiffened. "I'm fine," she said automatically. He nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. "I believe you believe that," he said. "If you ever decide you don't want to handle it alone, I'm here. Lena swallowed. After he left, she stood behind the counter, staring at the door long after it closed. His words replayed in her mind, colliding with the message still sitting on her phone. That evening, the lock on her apartment door clicked open later than usual. Lena's heart jumped into her throat. Footsteps crossed the floor. And she knew before she turned around that tonight wasn't going to end quietly. Lena learned to measure danger by what didn't happen. Trevor didn't raise his voice when he came in that night. He didn't slam the door. He set his keys down carefully on the counter, one by one, like he was making a point. That scared her more than shouting ever had. She stayed where she was, standing near the kitchen sink, hands damp from washing dishes that didn't need washing. The apartment felt smaller with him in it. The air thickened like it always did. "You ignored me," he said calmly. "I was working," Lena replied. She kept her voice even, neutral. She'd practiced that tone for years. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I told you not to be there." "I need the job," she said. "We need rent." Trevor stepped closer. Not fast. Deliberate. "I take care of things," he said. "You don't make decisions without me." Lena's chest tightened, but she didn't back away. Backing away made him feel powerful. She'd learned that too. Amaya stirred in the other room, shifting in her sleep. The sound grounded Lena, anchored her feet to the floor. "I didn't embarrass you," Lena said quietly. "I did my job." Trevor's hand came out of nowhere. Not a punch. Not a slap. Fingers digging into her arm, squeezing until white-hot pain shot through her. Lena bit down hard on her tongue to keep from making a sound. "You make me look stupid," he said softly. "And I don't like that." He released her just as suddenly and stepped back, straightening his jacket like nothing had happened. "Get some sleep," he added. "You look tired." Then he walked past her and into the bedroom, leaving the door open. Lena stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where he'd been. Her arm throbbed, heat pulsing under her skin. She didn't cry. Crying came later when she was alone and it was safe. She locked herself in the bathroom and ran cold water over her arm, watching the skin flush and fade. The bruise would be worse tomorrow. She already knew that. As she leaned over the sink, she caught her reflection. Her eyes looked dull, like they belonged to someone else. "This is temporary," she whispered. She didn't know who she was trying to convince. In bed that night, she lay rigid on her side, listening to Trevor's breathing deepen as he fell asleep. She waited until she was sure he wouldn't wake, then carefully slid out of bed and checked on Amaya. Her daughter slept curled around a stuffed bear, mouth slightly open. Peaceful. Unaware. Lena brushed a hand over Amaya's hair and felt something inside her crack. The next day unfolded the way so many had before. Too fast. Too heavy. At the cafe, Lena worked with a quiet intensity. She kept her sleeve down despite the heat. Her arm ached with every movement. No one commented. People rarely did. Daniel noticed anyway. He didn't mention the bruise. He didn't ask questions. He simply stayed a little longer, his presence steady, like a line drawn in pencil that could be erased but still existed. That unsettled her more than pity ever would have. When her shift ended, she checked her phone. 3 missed calls. No messages. Her stomach knotted. She walked home instead of taking the subway, even though it took longer. The movement helped. Each step reminded her she still had control over something. At the apartment, Trevor wasn't there. The quiet pressed in, thick and uneasy. Lena checked the bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom. Nothing disturbed. His jacket still hung by the door. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the eviction notice folded neatly on the nightstand. She hadn't told him about it yet. She didn't know how. That night, she lay awake again, replaying the same question she'd asked herself 100 times. Why don't you leave? The answers came easily. Because rent was due. Because shelters were full. Because Amaya needed stability. Because starting over sounded like jumping without knowing where you'd land. Because surviving what you know feels safer than risking something worse. In the early hours of the morning, her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. Asterisk, we need to talk. Tomorrow. Asterisk. No explanation. No context. Lena stared at the words until they blurred. She rolled onto her side, careful not to jostle her arm, and closed her eyes. She focused on Amaya's breathing in the next room. Tomorrow could mean anything, and that uncertainty was what scared her most. Morning came without relief. Lena woke before the alarm, her body already tense, like it had been bracing all night for impact. Trevor's side of the bed was empty. Sheets cold. That was never a good sign. She moved quietly, getting Amaya ready for school with practiced calm. She smiled. She joked. She tied shoelaces and packed lunch like everything was normal. Amaya chatted about a spelling test, about a girl who had taken her crayons. Lena listened, nodded, laughed in the right places. All the while, her mind counted hours. After dropping Amaya off, Lena didn't go straight to the cafe. She walked past it, kept going. The city felt louder today. Buses hissed. Car horns snapped. People moved fast, brushing past her like she was invisible. She clutched her jacket tighter around herself and headed toward the community center 3 blocks away. She'd passed the building 100 times and never gone in. The sign on the door read, "Free legal aid, Tuesdays and Thursdays." It was Tuesday. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Folding chairs lined one wall. A woman behind a desk looked up and smiled, warm and unhurried. "How can we help you today?" she asked. The question hit harder than Lena expected. For a second, no words came out. Just a tightness in her throat. Then everything rushed forward, messy and unpolished. "My landlord's evicting us," Lena said. "And my partner, he controls everything. I don't know what my options are." The woman nodded, already pulling out forms. No judgment. No shock. Just understanding. "Let's take this one step at a time," she said gently. An hour later, Lena left with a folder tucked under her arm and something unfamiliar in her chest. Hope. Small. Fragile. But real. At the cafe, Daniel noticed immediately that something was different. Lena moved with more purpose. Her eyes were sharper. Still tired, still guarded, but not hollow. "You okay?" he asked as she tied her apron. She hesitated, then nodded. "I will be." He accepted that. Didn't push. Mid-shift, her phone buzzed again. "Where are you?" She didn't reply. Another message followed seconds later. "Don't ignore me." Her hands trembled as she slipped the phone back into her pocket. She took a breath. Then another. Daniel caught the movement. "You can take 5, he said quietly. "Out back." She almost said no. Almost. The alley behind the cafe was narrow and smelled like damp concrete. Lena leaned against the brick wall and let the air fill her lungs. She pulled out her phone. "We'll talk tonight," she typed. The response came instantly. "We will." No heart. No period. Just control. Her shift dragged. Every customer felt like a test of patience she didn't have. By the time she clocked out, her nerves were raw. She picked Amaya up from aftercare and walked home slowly, letting the sunset stretch the day as long as possible. Amaya skipped beside her, unaware of the storm waiting behind their front door. Trevor's car was already there. Inside, the apartment felt wrong. Too neat. Too quiet. Trevor sat at the small kitchen table, hands folded, phone placed face down in front of him. He looked up as they entered. "Hey kiddo," he said, his voice light. Amaya hesitated, then smiled. "Hi." "Go start your homework," Lena said gently. Amaya glanced between them, sensing something, then disappeared into her room. The silence that followed was heavy. Trevor gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Lena stayed standing. "I went to legal aid today," she said before he could speak. Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise. Then anger. "You went where?" he asked. I needed information. You went behind my back. I went to protect my daughter, Lena said, her voice shaking but steady. Trevor stood slowly. The chair scraped against the floor. You think you can just make plans without me? He said. You think some strangers can help you? They already have, she replied. That was the wrong answer. Trevor stepped closer, his face inches from hers. You don't know what you're playing with, he whispered. Lena didn't move. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. From the other room, Amaya's door creaked open. Mom, her small voice called. Trevor turned toward the sound. And that was when Lena realized, whatever happened next would change everything. Amaya stood frozen in the doorway, her backpack still on her shoulders, eyes wide as she looked between Lena and Trevor. I'm just checking homework, Trevor said quickly, his voice shifting into something softer, almost pleasant. He turned away from Lena and smiled at Amaya. Why don't you grab a snack? Amaya didn't move right away. She looked at her mother instead. Lena forced a smile. It felt like her face might crack. Go on, baby. Amaya nodded slowly and retreated, closing the door behind her. The click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. Trevor's smile vanished. You're teaching her to disrespect me, he said. I'm teaching her to be safe, Lena replied. Trevor laughed under his breath. Safe from what? Me? He stepped back, giving her space that felt like a trap instead of mercy. He picked up his phone and tapped the screen. You know what I did today? He asked casually. Lena said nothing. I called your sister, he continued. Left her a voicemail. Told her I was worried about you. About your mood lately. Her stomach dropped. Leave her out of this. She deserves to know what's going on, he said. People should know who they're dealing with. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but sharp. Dinner passed in strained silence. Trevor acted normal in front of Amaya. Too normal. He joked. He asked about school. He even did the dishes. That scared Lena more than his anger ever had. When Amaya finally went to bed, Trevor lingered in the living room, scrolling through his phone. I'm going out, he said. Don't wait up. The door closed behind him with a soft finality. Lena locked it. Then she slid down against it, her legs giving out beneath her. Her hands shook as she pulled the folder from her bag. The legal aid pamphlets felt thin, fragile, but they were something. She read through them again. Emergency housing. Protective orders. Documentation. Document everything. She went into the bathroom and locked the door. Under the harsh light, she rolled up her sleeve. The bruise on her upper arm had darkened, blooming into deep purples and blues. She took a photo with her phone, making sure the date stamp was visible. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes tired but alert. At the cafe the next morning, Lena felt like she was walking on broken glass. Every sound made her flinch. Every raised voice sent her heart racing. Daniel noticed. You're jumpy today, he said gently as he wiped down the counter. Didn't sleep much, she replied. He nodded, then hesitated. Look, if you ever need anything. A ride. Time off. I've got your back. She met his eyes. Really looked at him. You don't even know me, she said. He smiled faintly. I know enough. The lunch rush hit hard. Tourists, business people, regulars. Lena moved on autopilot, pouring coffee, smiling, apologizing when orders were late. Halfway through the shift, a woman in a tailored coat sat at table 7. Expensive watch. Calm posture. Eyes that missed nothing. She watched Lena as she worked. When Lena approached with a coffee pot, the woman spoke quietly. That Bruise wasn't there yesterday. Lena's hand stilled. I'm sorry, she said. The woman gestured subtly toward Lena's arm. I come in here a lot. I notice things. Heat flooded Lena's face. It's nothing. The woman studied her for a long moment, then reached into her purse and slid a card across the table. If you ever want to talk, she said, call me. Lena glanced at the card. No company logo. Just a name and a number. Before she could respond, the woman stood and left. Lena stared at the card long after she was gone, her pulse pounding. That evening, as Lena and Amaya walked home, a familiar car slowed beside them. Trevor. He rolled down the window. Get in, he said. Lena stopped walking. No, she said. His jaw tightened. Don't make a scene. People passed by. A couple glanced over. I said no, Lena repeated louder this time. Trevor's eyes flicked around, calculating. He forced a smile. Fine. Walk. He drove off. Lena's knees felt weak, but she kept moving, her hand gripping Amaya's tightly. That night, Lena lay awake listening to the sounds of the apartment. The hum of the fridge. Distant sirens. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk, we need to talk. It's important. Asterisk. Lena stared at the screen, her chest tight, knowing deep down that the choices she made next would either trap her forever or finally set something in motion she couldn't stop. Lena didn't reply to the text that night. She turned the phone face down and lay still, listening to Amaya's soft breathing from the next room. Sleep came in fragments. Every time she drifted off, her mind pulled her back, replaying Trevor's voice, the woman's calm eyes at table 7, the weight of that card burning in her pocket. By morning, her decision wasn't fully formed, but it existed. She dropped Amaya at school, kissed her forehead a second longer than usual, then walked to the cafe with the card pressed flat between her fingers. The woman was already there. Same table. Same composed posture. A black coat draped neatly over the chair beside her. She looked up the moment Lena entered, as if she'd been expecting her. Lena's heart thudded. She considered pretending she hadn't seen her. Considered turning around. Instead, she walked over. I'm on shift, Lena said quietly. The woman nodded. I know. I won't take much of your time. She slid a folded napkin across the table. Inside was a single sentence written neatly. I can help you, but only if you want it. Lena swallowed. You don't even know me. The woman's mouth curved into something not quite a smile. I know patterns. I know fear. And I know when someone's running out of time. That landed harder than Lena expected. My name is Eleanor, the woman added. You can call me Ellie. Lena glanced around. Daniel was at the register, back turned. No one was watching. Why? Lena asked. Why me? Eleanor leaned back slightly. Because I've seen what happens when people look away. And because I used to be very good at looking away myself. Before Lena could ask what that meant, Eleanor stood. I'll be here tomorrow, she said. Same time. Whether you come talk to me or not is your choice. She left cash on the table, far more than the coffee cost, and walked out. Daniel watched her go, then looked at Lena. Friend of yours? No, Lena said. I don't think so. But she tucked the napkin into her pocket anyway. That afternoon, Trevor didn't come home. That alone should have been a relief. Instead, it set Lena's nerves on edge. Trevor never disappeared without a reason. At 7:30, her phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. She let it ring. Then another call. Then another. Finally, a voicemail. You think ignoring me makes you strong? Trevor's voice said, low and controlled. We're not done. Lena deleted it with shaking hands. She packed a small bag after Amaya fell asleep. Just essentials. Clothes. Documents. The folder from legal aid. She didn't leave. Not yet. The next day at the cafe, Eleanor returned. This time Lena sat down. They spoke quietly in pieces. Lena didn't tell everything. Not the worst parts. Not yet. She talked about money. About control. About feeling trapped. Eleanor listened without interrupting. I own a few businesses, Eleanor said eventually. Hospitality mostly. This cafe is one of them. Lena blinked. You're the owner? One of them, Eleanor corrected. And before you worry, no, this isn't about your job. Then what is it about? Lena asked. Eleanor studied her. I grew up watching my mother disappear in front of me. Not physically, emotionally, slowly. By the time anyone noticed, there was nothing left of her. Lena's chest tightened. I made a promise to myself, Eleanor continued. If I ever had the means to step in before it got that far, I would. Lena's voice came out barely above a whisper. What does stepping in look like? For now, Eleanor said. Information. Options. Safety. She slid another card across the table. This one had an address on it. A place you can go if things escalate, Eleanor said. No questions asked. That night, Trevor came home late. His movements were sharp, restless. He noticed a packed bag by the door immediately. What's that? He asked. Lena met his gaze. Insurance. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think you're smarter than me now? I think I'm tired, she said. Trevor stepped closer. Careful. Amaya coughed in her sleep from the other room. Trevor froze. For a moment, something like fear crossed his face. Then he straightened. This isn't over, he said quietly. Lena watched him walk away, her heart racing, knowing she had crossed an invisible line. And somewhere deep down she understood. Trevor wasn't just angry anymore. He was preparing. Trevor's preparation showed itself in small, calculated ways. The next morning, Lena discovered her debit card didn't work. She stood at the grocery store checkout, cheeks burning as the cashier tried it twice before shaking her head. Sorry? It's declined. Lena paid with loose cash from the bottom of her bag and walked home on shaking legs. When she checked her banking app, the balance was zero. Trevor had moved the money. Every dollar. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She made breakfast. She packed Amaya's lunch. She walked her to school like nothing was wrong. But her thoughts raced, stitching together every warning Eleanor and legal aid had given her. Financial control. Isolation. Escalation. At the cafe, Daniel noticed her distraction. You okay? He asked for the third time that morning. Lena hesitated, then said quietly, If I needed a favor, a big one, would you ask questions? He didn't answer right away. He just poured coffee, set the pot down, and met her eyes. I'd ask how soon, he said. Something in her chest loosened. That afternoon, Trevor sent her a message she hadn't expected. I spoke to a lawyer. Her stomach flipped. You don't need to do anything drastic, the message continued. Let's handle this like adults. Lena read it 3 times. Trevor had never mentioned lawyers before. Never framed himself as reasonable unless he was setting a trap. She didn't respond. When she got home, a folded piece of paper sat on the kitchen counter. A printed email. It was addressed to her sister. Subject line, concern. Trevor had drafted it but hadn't sent it yet. Lena read the words slowly, carefully. Each sentence painted her as unstable, overwhelmed, a risk to her child. He mentioned episodes, mood swings. He framed himself as patient, long-suffering, responsible. Her hands shook as she set the paper down. That night, Eleanor called. I won't ask why you didn't call, Eleanor said calmly. But I need you to listen. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, phone pressed tight to her ear. I did some quiet digging, Eleanor continued. Your partner has a history. Nothing criminal that stuck. But patterns. Former partners. Complaints that went nowhere. Lena's breath caught. Why are you telling me this now? Because he's getting nervous, Eleanor said. And nervous people make mistakes. Dangerous ones. Lena glanced toward Amaya's room. What do I do? Tomorrow, Eleanor said, you come see me after your shift. We'll talk through next steps. And Lena, if anything feels off tonight, you leave. No hesitation. After the call ended, Lena sat in the dark, listening. Trevor wasn't asleep. She could tell by the rhythm of his breathing, controlled, deliberate. At 2 in the morning he spoke. You know, he said softly, People believe whoever sounds calmer. Lena didn't answer. He turned toward her. You've been very busy lately. Her heart hammered. I just want my family, Trevor continued, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep it. Lena stared at the ceiling, every muscle locked, realizing with sick clarity that Trevor wasn't afraid of losing her anymore. He was afraid of losing control. And fear, she knew now, made him far more dangerous than anger ever had. Lena didn't sleep after that. She lay still until the gray light of dawn crept through the blinds, counting each breath Trevor took beside her. When he finally got up, moving quietly as if he knew she was awake, she waited until the door closed behind him before she sat up. Her hands were steady now. That scared her more than the shaking ever had. She moved fast but carefully. Woke Amaya with a gentle whisper. Packed a bag with practiced efficiency. No rushing. No noise. She told Amaya they were having a different kind of day, said it with a smile that almost held. At the cafe, Daniel didn't ask questions. He saw the bag. He saw Lena's face. Back door? He asked. She nodded. He drove them in silence. The city blurred past the window as Lena watched for Trevor's car in every mirror. When they reached the address Eleanor had given her, Daniel pulled over. You want me to wait? He asked. Lena shook her head. Thank you. For everything. He squeezed her hand once. You call if you need anything. The building looked ordinary. Brick. Cling. Unremarkable. That somehow made it feel safer. Inside, a woman at the desk greeted them by name. No forms. No questions. Just a keycard and directions. The room was small but warm. Clean sheets. A window that looked out onto a courtyard with a single tree. Amaya sat on the bed and bounced once. Is this a hotel? Lena smiled, the first real one in days. Something like that. Eleanor arrived an hour later. She didn't hug Lena. She didn't rush her. She sat across from her at the small table and let the silence settle. He knows you're pulling away, Eleanor said eventually. That's why he's escalating. Lena nodded. He's already talking about lawyers. Good, Eleanor replied. That means he's posturing. Eleanor laid out the plan slowly. Protective orders. Financial separation. Documentation. A timeline that didn't rely on hope or goodwill. This won't be quick, Eleanor said. And it won't be clean. Lena swallowed. But it's possible. Yes, Eleanor said. It is. That evening Lena's phone buzzed. Trevor. You took my daughter. The words punched the air from her lungs. You're making a mistake, the next message read. Asterisk, come home. We can fix this. Asterisk. Lena didn't respond. An hour later, another message came through. If you don't bring her back, I'll make sure you regret it. Eleanor saw the color drain from Lena's face. That's your opening, she said quietly. My opening for what? Lena asked. For protection. They documented the messages. Screenshots. Timestamps. Context. Eleanor made a call Lena didn't hear, speaking in a low, precise voice. By nightfall the room felt too quiet. Amaya fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the change. Lena sat by the window watching shadows move across the courtyard. She thought about the woman at table 7. The way Eleanor had noticed a bruise no one else had named out loud. The way seeing it had cracked something open she couldn't close again. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Eleanor nodded once. Answer it. Put it on speaker. Lena did. Lena, Trevor's voice came through, calm, almost gentle. You've had your little break. It's time to come home. I'm not coming back, Lena said. Pause. Then a quiet laugh. You don't get to decide that, Trevor replied. You don't have money. You don't have proof. And when this goes to court, they'll ask why you ran. Lena felt the fear rise, but it didn't own her anymore. I ran because I was scared, she said. And because I was smart enough to stop pretending I wasn't. Silence. Then Trevor spoke again, slower now. You think that woman can protect you? She won't be there forever. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes sharp. That's where you're wrong, she said into the phone. I'll be there as long as it takes. Another pause. Trevor hung up. Lena's hands shook after the call ended, but she didn't collapse this time. Eleanor stood. He won't stop tonight, she said. But he just made a mistake. Lena looked up. What kind? Eleanor's expression was unreadable. The kind that only happens when someone believes they're still winning. Outside, somewhere beyond the quiet courtyard, a car engine started. And Lena knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that Trevor wasn't finished making moves. Not yet. The knock came just after midnight. Not loud. Not frantic. 3 measured taps, spaced evenly like someone who knew exactly how much force to use to be taken seriously. Lena froze. Eleanor was already on her feet. She didn't rush to the door. She checked the hallway camera on her phone, her face tightening for a fraction of a second before smoothing out. It's him, Lena whispered. Yes, Eleanor said. And no, he's not supposed to be here. Amaya stirred in her sleep, rolling onto her side. Lena moved instinctively, placing herself between the bed and the door, her heart hammering so hard it made her dizzy. Eleanor held up a hand. Stay here. She opened the door just enough to keep the chain on. Trevor stood in the hallway, calm as ever. Clean jacket. Relaxed posture. The kind of man people trusted without thinking twice. You didn't tell me where you were taking my child, he said mildly. This is a protected residence, Eleanor replied. You are trespassing. Trevor smiled. I'm her father. No, Eleanor said. You're a man standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You think hiding her makes you powerful? I think threatening her mother makes you reckless, Eleanor replied. Trevor's eyes flicked past Eleanor, searching for Lena. Lena, he called softly. This isn't you. Lena didn't answer. Trevor straightened. Fine. We'll do this the official way. He turned and walked away, unhurried. The silence afterward was worse than the knock. Eleanor closed the door and locked it, then turned to Lena. He wanted to see if you'd panic. And? Lena asked. And you didn't, Eleanor said. That matters. The next morning, the first envelope arrived. Certified mail. Inside was a custody filing. Emergency motion. Trevor had listed himself as the primary caregiver. Claimed Lena had abducted their daughter. Attached were statements from a therapist Lena had never met and a landlord Lena barely recognized. Fabricated. Polished. Convincing. Lena's hands went numb. He planned this, she whispered. Yes, Eleanor said. For a long time. By noon there were 3 missed calls from unknown numbers. By evening, a voicemail from Lena's sister. Trevor reached out, her sister said, hesitant. He sounds worried. He says you're not okay. Lena pressed her forehead to the wall, breathing through the surge of anger and shame. He's turning people, she said. He's isolating you, Eleanor corrected. It's a classic move. That afternoon, Eleanor brought in a lawyer. Not flashy. Not loud. A woman with tired eyes and a voice that carried weight because it didn't waste words. We fight this with facts, the lawyer said. And timing. What if I lose her? Lena asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. The lawyer met her gaze. Then we appeal. And we keep going. But you don't lose today. Court was set for 48 hours later. That night, Lena dreamed she was back in the apartment. Trevor was cooking dinner, humming softly. Everything looked normal, until she noticed the door to Amaya's room was gone. Just a blank wall where it used to be. She woke up gasping. Eleanor was already awake, sitting at the small table with her laptop open. There's something I haven't told you, Eleanor said. Lena sat up slowly. What? Eleanor took a breath. Trevor knows who I am. Lena's stomach dropped. How? He worked for one of my companies. Years ago. Briefly. The room seemed to tilt. He was fired, Eleanor continued. Not for performance. For intimidation. For the way women around him started transferring departments. Lena's hands curled into the sheets. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't realize it was him until tonight, Eleanor said. And because I needed you to trust me for the right reasons, not fear. Silence stretched between them. He hates you, Lena said. Yes, Eleanor replied. And that's useful. How? Lena asked. Eleanor's eyes hardened. Because men like him don't lose control quietly. They make mistakes when they're angry at the wrong person. The next morning, as Lena reviewed documents with the lawyer, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then looked up. He's filed a complaint, Eleanor said. Against me. For what? Harassment. Coercion. Abuse of power. Lena's breath caught. That's a lie. Yes, Eleanor said. But it's a strategic one. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Inside the room, the air felt thin. Because now, Trevor wasn't just trying to take Amaya. He was trying to burn down anyone standing between them. And Lena understood, with terrifying clarity, that the next move wouldn't be about winning in court. It would be about survival. The court building smelled like disinfectant and old paper. Lena noticed that first. Then the echo of footsteps. The low hum of voices that all sounded too calm for what was at stake. Trevor sat across the aisle, suit pressed, posture relaxed. He looked like a man who belonged there. When his eyes met Lena's, he nodded once, polite. Almost kind. That was the performance. Eleanor sat beside Lena, unreadable. The lawyer flipped through a folder, calm in a way Lena envied. When the judge entered, the room rose. Lena's knees felt weak as she sat back down. Trevor's attorney spoke first. He painted a careful picture. A devoted father. A concerned partner. A woman who had become unstable under stress. He referenced Lena's sudden departure. Her lack of funds. Her reliance on a wealthy third party. Eleanor's name hung in the air without being spoken. Lena kept her hands folded in her lap, nails digging into skin she couldn't feel. When it was their turn, the lawyer stood slowly. She didn't dramatize. She didn't accuse. She laid out facts. Text messages. Dates. Times. Screenshots of threats. The photo of the bruise. Financial records showing Trevor's sudden transfer of funds. A timeline that showed cause and effect, not chaos. The judge listened. Trevor didn't look worried. Not yet. Then Eleanor's lawyer stood. He addressed the complaint Trevor had filed against Eleanor. Calmly dismantled it. Employment records. Prior internal reports. Witness statements from women who no longer worked at Eleanor's company. Patterns. For the first time, Trevor shifted in his seat. The judge called a short recess. In the hallway, Trevor approached Lena. Too close. You think this makes you look good? He murmured. Letting her fight your battles? Lena met his eyes. I'm not alone anymore. His smile thinned. You're borrowing strength. That runs out. Eleanor stepped between them. Step back. Trevor's jaw tightened. He leaned in, voice low. This isn't over. I know, Eleanor said. That's why I came prepared. Back in the courtroom, the judge ruled. Temporary protective order granted. No contact. Supervised visitation only, pending full review. Lena's breath left her in a rush she hadn't realized she was holding. Trevor's face went blank. Outside, cameras waited. Not many, but enough. Trevor walked past them without comment. Eleanor paused, then turned back. This is where he changes tactics, she said quietly. He'll stop trying to look reasonable. That night, Lena slept for 3 straight hours before waking to the sound of her phone vibrating. A known number. A photo came through. The old apartment building. Their old door. Then a message. Asterisk, you can run. You can hide. But places remember. Asterisk. Lena's hand shook. Eleanor looked at the screen, her expression hardening. Good, she said. Good? Lena whispered. Yes, Eleanor replied. Because now he's crossed a line that leaves a record. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. And for the first time since this began, Lena didn't feel like prey. She felt like someone standing at the edge of a fight that was finally out in the open. The protective order didn't bring peace. It brought pressure. By morning, the photo Trevor sent had been logged, forwarded, documented. Eleanor moved with quiet efficiency, making calls, filing reports, locking doors that were already locked. Lena watched it all like someone observing a storm map, aware that the center hadn't passed yet. Amaya sensed the shift immediately. Are we in trouble? She asked over cereal, her voice small. Lena knelt beside her chair. No, sweetheart. We're just being careful. Amaya studied her face. Children always knew when answers were incomplete. She nodded anyway. At the cafe, word traveled fast. Not the details, just the tension. A regular asked if Lena was okay. Daniel didn't leave her side longer than necessary. Even the clatter of dishes sounded sharper, as if the room itself was listening. Mid-morning, Eleanor called Lena into the back office. He's been busy, Eleanor said, turning the laptop so Lena could see. Anonymous posts. Carefully worded accusations. Screenshots taken out of context. A narrative forming online that painted Lena as unstable and Eleanor as manipulative. He's trying to poison the well, Lena said. Yes, Eleanor replied. Public opinion before legal resolution. Can he do that? Lena asked. He already is. The lawyer confirmed it later that afternoon. This isn't about winning the case, she said. It's about exhausting you. That night, Lena dreamed again. This time she was standing in the cafe. Every customer wore Trevor's face. Every voice asked the same question. Why didn't you just stay? She woke up drenched in sweat. The next day brought the first real crack in Trevor's armor. Eleanor received a call from a former co-worker of Trevor's. A woman who had ignored messages for years. Who had blocked numbers. Who had convinced herself it was easier not to remember. I saw his name in the filing, the woman said. And I couldn't pretend anymore. She had saved emails. Notes. A resignation letter she never sent. By evening there were 2 more. Not enough to end everything. Enough to shift weight. Trevor responded by escalating again. He showed up outside Amaya's school. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He stood across the street, hands in his pockets, watching. A teacher noticed. Then another parent. The principal called Lena. By the time Eleanor arrived with documentation in hand, Trevor was gone. But the message had landed. He wants you to feel exposed, Eleanor said in the car afterward. Like there's nowhere he can't reach. Lena stared out the window. It's working. That night, Lena did something she hadn't planned. She called her sister. There was a long silence after she said hello. I know what he told you, Lena said quietly. And I won't argue with it. I just need you to listen. She didn't dramatize. She didn't cry. She told the story in order. Dates. Moments. Bruises without naming them as such. Control without using the word. When she finished, her sister's voice broke. I didn't want to believe it, she said. It was easier to think you were exaggerating. I know, Lena replied. I'm sorry, her sister said. I should have come sooner. After the call ended, Lena sat very still. The room felt different. Lighter. Not safe but less sealed. The next morning, a subpoena arrived. Trevor was demanding Eleanor's private business records. Financials. Emails. Anything to suggest coercion or leverage. Eleanor read it once, then laughed softly. Not amused. Focused. He's desperate, she said. Is he? Lena asked. Yes, Eleanor replied. Because he stopped pretending. By afternoon, the cafe received a call from a reporter, a small outlet, curious, neutral, asking about a dispute involving one of the owners. Eleanor declined to comment. Trevor didn't. That evening, a short article went live, carefully balanced, but his quote stood out. "She's being influenced," Trevor said. "I'm worried about my child." Lena read it once, then closed the laptop. "He sounds convincing," she said. "He sounds rehearsed," Eleanor corrected. "And rehearsed people slip." As if summoned by the thought, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She read the message, then looked up slowly. "He violated the protective order," she said. "How?" Lena asked. "He emailed me directly. Threatened litigation unless I returned what wasn't mine." Lena's pulse quickened. What happens now? Eleanor met her gaze. Now the court stops giving him the benefit of the doubt. Outside, rain began to fall. Steady. Relentless. And somewhere beneath the noise, Lena felt it, the shift. Not victory. Momentum. The hearing was moved up. That alone told Lena everything she needed to know. Court no longer felt abstract. Felt like a tightening circle. Less waiting. Less room to maneuver. Trevor's violation of the protective order had done what Eleanor predicted. It stripped away his mask of restraint. Still, when Lena saw him again, he looked calm. Too calm. He sat at the table across the room, hands folded, eyes forward. No glances her way. No visible anger. Just stillness. The kind that made Lena's skin prickle. The judge reviewed the violation first. The email. The language. The timing. Trevor's lawyer argued it was a misunderstanding. That the message was sent in the context of legal negotiation. The judge didn't interrupt. Just listened. Then Eleanor's lawyer stood. She read the email out loud. Every word. Slowly. Without commentary. When she finished, the room felt colder. The judge looked at Trevor. "You were explicitly ordered not to make contact." Trevor finally spoke. "I didn't threaten her." "You attempted to intimidate," the judge replied. "That is contact." The ruling was swift. Stricter conditions. No proximity to Lena, Amaya, Eleanor, or any associated locations. Violations would no longer be handled with warnings. Trevor nodded as if he expected nothing less. Outside the courtroom, he didn't approach. But he smiled at Lena as he passed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. That night, Eleanor doubled security at the residence. Cameras checked. Logs updated. Lena tried to focus on normal things, homework, dinner, bedtime stories, but the tension hummed beneath every moment. Amaya fell asleep with her hand curled into Lena's shirt. "Stay," she whispered. "I'm here," Lena promised. But at 2:17 a.m., a loud crack shattered the quiet. Lena jolted upright. Not a knock. A bang. Eleanor was already moving, voice calm but sharp. "Stay back." They checked the cameras. Nothing. No one in the courtyard. No movement at the gates. Then Eleanor's phone buzzed. A message. "Check your car." Lena's heart slammed into her ribs. They didn't go outside. Not immediately. Eleanor called it in first. Documented the threat. Only then did security escort them to the parking lot. Lena's car sat exactly where she'd left it. Except for the windshield. A single, clean fracture ran from the bottom corner all the way across, like a fault line. Tucked under the wiper was a folded piece of paper. No signature. Just 4 words written in block letters. "You missed a spot. Amaya never saw it. Eleanor handled everything. The report. The tow. The replacement." She spoke in short, precise sentences, but Lena noticed the tension in her jaw. "This wasn't random," Lena said quietly. "No," Eleanor agreed. "It was a message." The next day, something unexpected happened. The cafe got busy. Unusually busy. Customers lingered. Asked Lena how she was. Left bigger tips. One woman squeezed her hand and said, I don't know what you're dealing with, but I see you. Lena didn't ask how she knew. Daniel leaned over and murmured, whatever's happening out there, it's not all going his way. By afternoon, Eleanor's phone rang again. She listened, asked 2 questions, ended the call. Then she looked at Lena with an expression Lena hadn't seen before. Satisfaction. He slipped, Eleanor said. Where? Lena asked. He contacted one of the women who came forward. Tried to convince her to recant. Lena's breath caught. That's witness tampering, Eleanor finished. And she recorded it. For the first time, Lena felt something unfamiliar rise above the fear. Not relief, not safety, but the sense that Trevor's control was unraveling, not because he was losing interest but because he was losing discipline. That evening, as Lena tucked Amaya into bed, her phone buzzed again. A known number. A voice message. She played it on speaker before Eleanor could stop her. Trevor's voice filled the room. Lower. Rougher than before. You think you're winning, he said. You think people like her don't get tired. Pause. They always do. The message ended. Eleanor looked at Lena, her eyes sharp. He's cornered. Lena stared at the dark screen, her pulse steady in a way that surprised her. No, she said quietly. He's not cornered yet. She looked toward the window, toward the place where the courtyard lights cut long shadows across the ground. But he's about to make a mistake he can't explain away. And somewhere deep inside, Lena knew, the next move wouldn't come through lawyers or courts. It would come when Trevor realized fear no longer worked the way it used to. And that realization, she sensed, would be dangerous for everyone. The mistake came 3 days later. It didn't arrive with a crash or a threat. It arrived quietly, disguised as coincidence. Daniel called Lena during her lunch break. There's a guy here asking about you, he said in a low voice. Says he's an old friend. Lena's stomach dropped. What does he look like? Clean cut. Nervous. Keeps checking his phone. Eleanor was already moving, grabbing her coat. Don't let him leave, she said. Lena didn't know why she trusted that instinct, but she did. When they reached the cafe, the man was still there, sitting at the counter, hands wrapped too tightly around a cup of coffee. Can I help you? Eleanor asked. He looked up, startled. I was just asking about Lena. Eleanor smiled politely. Why? The man hesitated. A guy paid me. Told me to confirm if she worked here. Said it was for a delivery. Eleanor's smile disappeared. Did he give you a name? Lena asked. Trevor, the man said. He said he was her husband. Eleanor exhaled slowly. Did he tell you to do anything else? The man swallowed. He wanted her schedule. Where she lives now. If she walks alone. Daniel's face went pale. Eleanor stepped back, already dialing. Stay right there, she told the man. You're about to help yourself by telling the truth. By the time officers arrived, the man was shaking. He handed over his phone. Text messages. Instructions. A payment receipt. Trevor's name attached to all of it. That afternoon, a warrant was issued. Trevor wasn't home. He wasn't at work. He wasn't answering his phone. By nightfall, he was officially a fugitive. Lena sat in the small safe room, staring at the wall, trying to understand what that meant. He ran, she said. He panicked, Eleanor corrected. That's different. But he knows where we are, Lena whispered. Not anymore, Eleanor said. We've moved you. Again. The new place was smaller. Quieter. Hidden in plain sight. Amaya asked if this was another hotel. Lena said yes. Eleanor didn't correct her. 2 days passed without a word. Then Lena's sister called. He showed up, she said, voice tight. At my house. He wanted to talk. Lena's breath caught. Did you let him in? No, her sister said. But he's not okay. He looks unhinged. Eleanor listened on speaker. Did he say anything specific? Eleanor asked. He kept saying Lena was being poisoned against him. That you were all conspiring. Eleanor nodded slowly. Did he threaten you? No, her sister said. But he wouldn't leave until I called the police. After the call ended, Eleanor looked at Lena. He's losing grip on reality, she said. That's when people become unpredictable. That night, Lena stood by the window watching streetlights flicker. Every shadow felt too long. Her phone buzzed. Blocked number. A single message came through before the system could stop it. You don't know who you're trusting. Lena didn't show Eleanor. She deleted it. Because this time it didn't make her afraid. It made her certain. Trevor wasn't trying to get her back anymore. He was trying to make sure no one else could help her. And that meant the end wasn't going to come quietly. It was going to come with one final, desperate move. The call came just after dawn. Not to Lena. To Eleanor. She stepped into the hallway to answer it, but Lena could still hear the tension shift in her voice. The careful calm. The clipped words. When Eleanor came back, her face had changed. He turned himself in, she said. Lena stared. Trevor? Yes. It didn't make sense. Nothing about Trevor had ever suggested surrender. He didn't walk into a police station, Eleanor added. He went to a hospital. Claimed he was afraid he'd hurt someone. Lena felt cold spread through her chest. Is that good? It means he's trying to look unstable instead of dangerous, Eleanor said. Different angle. Same goal. What goal? Lena asked. To avoid responsibility, Eleanor replied. And to get sympathy. By noon, the news had spread through the legal channels. Psychiatric evaluation. Temporary hold. Motions filed by his attorney to delay proceedings due to mental health concerns. He's trying to slow the clock, the lawyer explained over speakerphone, and muddy the narrative. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands knotted together. What happens to Amaya if he's declared unwell? Then he argues he needs access to her as part of treatment, the lawyer said. Which we will fight. That afternoon, Lena went to the cafe for the first time in days. The familiar smell of coffee and baked bread grounded her. Daniel pulled her aside. Some guy was here asking about you yesterday. Said he was from a delivery service. Lena closed her eyes. We handled it, Daniel added. But, just so you know, at the hospital, Trevor refused visitors. He did, however, leave a message. It wasn't a voicemail. It was a handwritten note delivered through his lawyer. Lena read it slowly. Asterisk, I'm getting help. I want to be a better man. Don't punish me for trying. Asterisk. Eleanor watched her face carefully. It's a performance, she said. I know, Lena replied. But he sounds almost believable. That's what makes it dangerous, Eleanor said. Because some people will want to believe him. The next court date was postponed. A week. Then another. Trevor remained under observation. His story shifted slightly each time. Stress. Paranoia. A sense of betrayal. He never admitted to threats. Never mentioned the investigator. Never acknowledged the vandalism. Just confusion. Just pain. Lena felt the weight of it pressing down. What if he wins? She asked one night, sitting in the dark. Eleanor didn't answer right away. Then we keep fighting. But he won't. Because lies built this way eventually collapse. How do you know? Lena asked. Eleanor looked at her. Because I've seen it from the inside. What do you mean? Lena asked. Eleanor hesitated. Then quietly, my mother married a man like him. Charming. Careful. Controlled. When she finally left, he tried to destroy everyone who helped her. Lena swallowed. What happened? He made one mistake, Eleanor said. And it was enough. The next morning, a nurse from the hospital called Eleanor. Trevor had requested to speak to Lena. Eleanor shook her head. Not happening. He's insisting, the nurse said. Says he has something important to confess. Lena's pulse quickened. Confess what? We don't know, the nurse replied. But he's asking specifically for her. Eleanor looked at Lena, searching her face. This could be a trap, Eleanor warned. I know, Lena said. But something in her voice had changed. Or it could be the crack. Eleanor considered that, then nodded once. We don't do anything alone. And we don't do anything without safeguards. That evening, as Lena prepared for the meeting, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The bruise was gone, but the memory of it wasn't. And she knew, whatever Trevor wanted to say next wasn't about healing. It was about control slipping through his fingers. And men like him didn't let go without trying one last time to pull everything down with them. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and something faintly metallic. Lena noticed that first, the way it clung to the back of her throat as she stepped inside. Trevor sat on the bed, wearing a pale gown that made him look smaller, thinner, harmless if you didn't know better. A guard stood by the door. A nurse lingered just outside. Eleanor watched through the glass. Lena took one step forward. Trevor smiled. You came. I didn't come for you, Lena said. I came for the truth. He tilted his head, studying her. You look stronger. I am, she replied. For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Not regret. Not guilt. Fear. I messed up, Trevor said softly. I let things get out of hand. You hired someone to track me, Lena said. You sent threats. You tried to take my child. Trevor sighed as if she were being unfair. I was scared. You were being manipulated. Lena didn't argue. She waited. That made him uneasy. I know Eleanor, Trevor continued. I know what she's capable of. So do I, Lena said. She's capable of helping me survive you. His jaw tightened. You think she's your savior? He asked. She's using you. Did she tell you why she noticed that bruise? Lena's heart skipped. What do you mean? Trevor leaned forward. Because she's obsessed with stories like yours. She collects them. Turns them into proof of her own virtue. That's not true, Lena said, but something in her voice wavered. She didn't just recognize fear, Trevor pressed. She was looking for it. Lena felt the old doubt stir, sharp and unwelcome. That's not a confession, she said. That's you trying to make me doubt. Trevor smiled faintly. You always were good at seeing patterns. Except the ones right in front of you. He reached under the blanket. The guard stiffened. Trevor pulled out a folded piece of paper. I kept records, he said. Messages. Emails. From Eleanor. Years ago. He slid the paper across the tray table. Lena didn't touch it. She knew who I was, Trevor said. She knew exactly what kind of man I was when she offered to help you. That wasn't compassion. That was control. Lena's pulse roared in her ears. You're lying, she said. Trevor's eyes gleamed. Ask her. The nurse cleared her throat. Time's almost up. Trevor leaned back, satisfied. One last thing, he said. I didn't come here to get better. I came here because it's the only place they'd make you talk to me. Lena turned toward the door. Whatever you think you're doing, Trevor called after her, you're not free. You just changed owners. The door closed behind her. Eleanor was waiting. Lena held up the paper Trevor had slid across the table. Her hands were shaking. He says you knew who he was, Lena said. He says you chose me. Eleanor looked at the paper. Didn't reach for it. Yes, she said quietly. I did. The words hit harder than any lie could have. You knew, Lena whispered. I knew his pattern, Eleanor said. And when I saw it starting again, I intervened. That's not what I asked, Lena said. Eleanor's voice was steady. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel like a case. Or a project. But that's what I was, Lena said. To both of you. No, Eleanor said. To him you were something to own. To me, you were someone I refused to abandon again. Silence stretched between them. Again? Lena asked. Eleanor's eyes darkened. My mother didn't make it out in time. Lena felt the ground shift beneath her. So you used me, she said softly, to fix something you couldn't. Eleanor didn't deny it. I also gave you every tool you needed to fight, Eleanor said. Both things can be true. Lena stepped back. Get me home, she said. I need to think. As they walked down the hospital corridor, Lena realized the truth was far messier than she'd imagined. Trevor had been dangerous. But Eleanor wasn't clean. And somewhere between them, Lena had to decide what freedom actually meant. Because if she couldn't trust either of them completely, then the final choice would be hers alone. Lena didn't go back to the safe house that night. Eleanor had offered. Quietly. No pressure. But Lena asked to be dropped somewhere else instead, a small extended-stay hotel near the river where no one knew her name. Eleanor respected it, even though her eyes carried concern. Take the time you need, Eleanor said as Lena stepped out of the car. But don't disappear. I won't, Lena replied. I just need to remember who I am without either of you in my ear. Eleanor nodded once and drove away. The room was small but clean. The air smelled faintly of soap and coffee from the lobby downstairs. Amaya curled up on the bed, already half asleep, worn out by weeks of tension she was too young to understand. Lena sat on the edge of the mattress and watched her breathe. That was the truth beneath all the noise. Her daughter. Not Trevor's power games. Not Eleanor's complicated rescue. Just this small, steady life trusting her to keep the world from breaking in. The court date came 3 days later. Trevor appeared by video, pale eyes darting. His lawyer leaned close, whispering instructions. Trevor nodded too often, too fast. Lena watched him from the small conference room Eleanor's legal team had arranged. Eleanor wasn't in the room. That had been Lena's condition. No shadows behind her. The judge reviewed everything. The messages. The investigator. The vandalism. The witness who recorded Trevor's call. When the ruling came, it was quiet. Full protective order. No custody. No contact. Mandatory long-term supervision if Trevor ever petitioned to see Amaya again. Trevor's face collapsed in slow motion. Not anger. Not even shock. Loss. The screen went black. Lena didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just closed her eyes and felt the weight finally lift from her chest. It wasn't relief yet, but it was space. Eleanor met her outside the courthouse. I kept my word, Eleanor said. He won't reach you. Lena studied her for a long moment. You didn't do this alone, Lena said. And neither did I. No, Eleanor agreed. But I need my life back on my own terms, Lena continued. Not because you're watching. Not because he's chasing. Because I choose it. Eleanor nodded slowly. Then I'll step back. Not disappear, Lena said. Just don't hold the reins. Eleanor's mouth curved into something that might have been pride. Or regret. Or both. Amaya ran up to Lena, wrapping her arms around her legs. Are we okay now? She asked. Lena knelt and hugged her tightly. We're going to be. Weeks passed. Lena moved into a small apartment near the cafe. Daniel helped carry boxes. The walls were bare, but the windows let in light. That felt like enough for now. The bruise on her arm had faded. But Lena kept the photo. Not to hurt herself. To remember what she survived. One afternoon, Eleanor stopped by. Just once. Brought a housewarming plant. No lawyers. No folders. I won't come again unless you ask, she said. I know, Lena replied. They stood there for a moment, two women shaped by different kinds of loss, finally letting go of the same man. As Eleanor left, Lena closed the door behind her and leaned against it. For the first time, there was no one on the other side trying to force their way in. Only silence. And it was beautiful. That evening, Lena made dinner while Amaya did homework at the small kitchen table. Outside, the city hummed. Ordinary. Alive. Lena caught her reflection in the window. Not perfect. not healed, but standing. And that was enough. If this story moved you, stayed with you, or made you feel something real, take a moment to support it. Tap like, subscribe for more stories that dig deep into the human heart, and feel free to leave a comment. Even a single word helps these stories find the people who need them. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is choose their own life.